It started, as most things do, quietly. No dramatic spark, no sweeping declarations. Just a moment, a steady, solid presence in the chaos that was my early career. I met Elise during my first few months in branding when I was still trying to figure out what the hell I was doing. I was 27, newly hired at a mid-sized agency in Paris, and determined to make a name for myself. Everything was loud then. Deadlines, egos, the constant hum of competition. I was fighting to stand out, terrified of fading into the background. Elise wasn't like the others. She wasn't trying to be noticed. She didn't need to be the loudest voice in the room. She was the kind of person who made space for others, who listened more than she spoke, who took her coffee black and her morning slowly. She worked in a different department, strategy, I think, or maybe operations, and we met over a broken printer, of all things. I was cursing under my breath. She showed me how to unjam the tray with 2 fingers and a smile. That was the beginning. Our connection unfolded the way a Polaroid develops, slowly, softly, with no real urgency. She didn't flirt. She didn't ask questions that tried to pin me down. She just let me be. With her, I didn't feel like I had to perform. I didn't have to prove I was the smartest, the fastest, the most creative. I could be tired. I could be unsure. I could be human. We started seeing each other after work. Late dinners, walks along the Seine, long Sunday afternoons in bookstores. She loved stories, especially the quiet ones. She read me passages out loud from novels I'd never heard of, her voice low and warm, and I found myself wanting to live in that tone, that calm. She made me feel like I wasn't alone, like I didn't have to claw my way forward every second of every day. And somewhere along the way, we fell into something like love. Elise never needed much, not in the material sense. She wasn't the kind of woman who hinted about rings or vacation homes or promotions. She wanted time, presence, honesty. She wanted mornings where we didn't look at our phones, dinners without distraction. She wanted a partner, not a project. And for a while, I thought I could be that man. She believed in me. God, she believed in me. There were nights when I came home feeling like a failure, like the pitch went wrong, like the creative team didn't respect me, like I was one mistake away from being exposed as a fraud, and she would look me in the eye and say, "You're better than this day." That kind of faith, it gets into your bones. It becomes part of how you see yourself. But here's the thing they don't tell you about being believed in. It creates pressure. Quiet, invisible pressure. Because when someone sees the best in you, it becomes harder to admit the worst. I started hiding things, not big things at first, just stress, just doubt, just the fact that sometimes I didn't want to come home and talk about feelings. Sometimes I wanted to be ruthless. Sometimes I wanted to win. And Elise didn't understand that part of me. Not really. She thought ambition was something to manage, to temper, to keep in balance with the rest of life. She didn't see it as a hunger that gnaws at you from the inside, a voice that whispers, if you slow down, you'll lose. She started asking questions like, when will it be enough? And I didn't know how to answer, because it's never enough. Not when you've spent your whole life proving you belong in rooms you were never invited into. Not when you've built your identity around being indispensable, being brilliant, being more. There's always another level, always another project, another deal, another mountain to climb. I tried to explain it to her. Once, we were lying in bed, the window open to the Paris night, and she asked me what I was afraid of. I said, becoming irrelevant. She turned toward me, her hand on my chest, and said, to me you never will be. It was a beautiful thing to say. It just wasn't enough. I began staying at the office later. I told myself it was temporary, just a push for this one campaign, this one client. But soon, late nights became the norm. Our dinners turned into cold leftovers. Our Sundays became solo routines. Elise tried to hold us together. She left me notes on the fridge, sent me articles about burnout, suggested a weekend trip. I nodded. I promised. I never followed through. And slowly the space between us became a wall. It wasn't that I stopped loving her. I don't even know if love was the right word anymore. It was more like obligation, comfort, guilt, memory. She knew my chaos. She'd held me through it. But now she wanted me to stop, to slow down, to rest. And I couldn't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The hardest part was watching her try to pretend she was okay. She smiled at dinners with friends. She asked how my meetings went. She waited up for me with a book in her lap, and her heart in her throat. But I saw it, the quiet pain, the questions she didn't ask, the truth she already knew. She never accused me, never yelled, never cried. She just faded, slowly, like a song you realize has ended without knowing when. I wish I had done something then. I wish I had ended it with honesty, with clarity. But I didn't. I kept dragging us both forward, thinking I could make it work. Thinking if I just had more time, I'd figure out how to be everything she needed and still chase everything I wanted. But I was already drifting, and into that space, that growing silence, something else began to form. Her name was Amara. Amara came into my life like a spark in the middle of a quiet storm. I still remember the first time we talked. It was late, the office was half dark, the kind of hush that only exists when everyone's gone home but you're still chasing something. She leaned against the edge of my desk, holding a cold coffee and a warm smirk, and asked me, "Do you really think this pitch will work?" She didn't ask it to doubt me. She asked because she cared, and because she was already thinking of 10 ways it could be better. There was no pretense with Amara. She was smart, sharp, the kind of woman who made ambition feel sexy, not shameful. She didn't need me to be soft. She didn't want reassurance. She wanted impact, fire, results. With Elise, I always felt like I had to explain why I worked so hard, why I stayed late, why I wanted more. Elise saw work as something to be balanced. Amara saw it as something to conquer. And honestly, in that chapter of my life, that difference was magnetic. Amara didn't ask me why I was busy. She asked what I needed to win. That felt revolutionary. It started with long nights, shared screens, debates over color palettes and consumer psychology, and what it meant to build a brand that didn't just sell, but moved people. And before I could process it, I realized I was thinking about her even after I got home. Not just about her ideas, but her voice, her laugh, her mind. But I hadn't broken up with Elise. And no, we hadn't kissed yet. We hadn't crossed that line. But I'd be lying if I said the line wasn't starting to blur. I told myself I was being responsible. I told myself I needed clarity before I made any decisions. But in truth, I was scared. Scared to hurt Elise. Scared to make the wrong choice. Scared that I might not deserve either of them. I remember this one night, Elise was asleep beside me, her hand resting gently on my chest. It should have been peaceful. It should have felt safe. But my mind was somewhere else. On a conversation I'd had with Amara earlier that day. On the way her eyes lit up when we cracked the big presentation strategy together. On the way she had said, "You're more brilliant than you know. You just hide behind caution." That sentence haunted me. I wasn't trying to juggle two women. I wasn't trying to be cruel. I just didn't know how to let go of the past while standing at the edge of something new. And so I did nothing. The most cowardly move of all. I didn't lie to either of them. Not exactly. But I wasn't honest either. I said too little. I waited too long. I let momentum make choices I should have made myself. I remember thinking, if I just wait, maybe the truth will sort itself out. It didn't happen suddenly. That's the hardest part to explain. There wasn't a dramatic confrontation. No slammed doors or broken vases. Just silence. Elise wasn't the kind of woman to scream. When she found out about Amara, not the whole truth, just enough of it, she didn't cry in front of me. She just stood there in the kitchen, holding a mug she wasn't drinking from, and asked me, "Is there something you need to tell me?" And in that moment, I froze. I wanted to tell her everything. That I was confused, that I was terrified, that I'd never wanted to hurt her, but I had. I'd let things go too far with Amara emotionally. I had betrayed the quiet, steady trust Elise had given me. And the truth is, I didn't say anything. I mumbled something about work, about stress, about how things had been hard lately. Lies of omission. Cowardice dressed as caution. She didn't press further. She just nodded. And then a few days later, she left. Said she needed space to think. She never really came back. Amara didn't find out in the same way. With her, it was more like erosion. She noticed my hesitation, my pauses, the way I avoided looking at my phone when Elise texted. One night, after we had just landed a big client together, we were celebrating at this rooftop bar downtown, the kind with dim lights and overpriced cocktails. She leaned in close and whispered, "Are you ever going to be mine, or am I just your escape plan?" And that question, it cut deeper than anything Elise had said, because it was true. I had been hiding in Amara, hiding from the guilt of losing Elise, from the fear of choosing wrong, from the parts of myself that didn't know how to exist without being needed by someone. I didn't answer her question either. 2 weeks later, she left. Not with tears, not with drama. Just a short, calm message. You're brilliant, Julian, but you confuse love with attention, and I'm not interested in being part of your indecision. She was right. What followed wasn't some movie-style breakdown. No rainstorms, no dramatic music. Just emptiness. I kept working. Of course I did. That's what I'm good at. The agency was thriving. The pitch Amara and I had built together turned into a flagship account. New hires came in. The office buzzed with energy. But my corner of it, it stayed cold. I didn't replace Amara. I didn't reach out to Elise. I told myself I needed time, that I was rebuilding, that I was learning. But the truth was I didn't know what to say. To them, to myself, to anyone. I stopped going to the cafe Elise and I used to visit every Sunday. But then one afternoon, months later, I found myself walking past it. The chairs outside still looked the same. That awkward lean on the left one where the leg wobbled slightly. I sat down. Out of habit, I ordered her favorite tea. The waitress looked at the empty seat across from me and smiled. Expecting someone? I didn't answer. I just smiled back. In that moment, I realized no matter how much success I built, how many campaigns I won, how many new faces filled my team, I had lost something I couldn't replace. Not because they left, but because I never had the courage to hold on to what mattered before it slipped away. I had always seen myself as strategic, controlled, analytical. But when it came to love, I was just a boy lost in the maze of his own making. And in that cafe with the tea going cold and no one sitting across from me, I felt it for the first time. Not heartbreak, but the silence that comes after you break two hearts and still can't explain why. There's a question I've asked myself more times than I'd like to admit. Was I the villain, or was I just weak? People love a clear-cut story. They want a hero, a villain, someone to root for, and someone to blame. But the truth is, things are rarely that simple. Life isn't black and white. It's messy, filled with contradictions, desires, and regrets that never fit neatly into the boxes we try to put them in. Love, in particular, is not a perfect thing. It's not something you can control or plan. It twists, it changes, it breaks. And sometimes it doesn't ask for permission to do any of that. When I was with Elise, I felt safe. There was no rushing, no chaos. It was like I could breathe, just exist, and somehow it all seemed enough. She was calm, peaceful, and I needed that. But after a while, that peace became too still. I was too still. I began to realize that being loved without ever being seen, truly seen for who I was, could suffocate you. Elise didn't ask for too much. She didn't expect me to change. But I wanted more. I wanted to reach beyond that stability, to grow, to do something bigger. Elise saw the best in me, but she couldn't understand the fire inside that needed to burn. And then came Amara. She saw me, really saw me. Not just the man I was pretending to be, but the man I was trying to become. She didn't tell me to slow down. She told me to keep going, to rise higher, to keep pushing. With her, I felt alive. With her, I felt understood in ways I hadn't even realized I was longing for. But that didn't make my choice any easier. Amara's presence was like a force of nature, and I was drawn to her. She was passionate, determined, ambitious in a way I admired but also feared. There was no hiding with her. She challenged me. She made me question everything. And when it came down to it, she was the one who pushed me to decide, to choose. I didn't want to hurt Elise. I didn't want to break her heart, but I didn't want to stay in a life that didn't fit me anymore either. So I let go. Or I tried to. Slowly, bit by bit. Amara and I moved in together, and I thought that maybe this was the solution. Maybe with her, things would be different. We built a life. We made plans. We talked about the future, about building something that didn't rely on the past. We were equals, partners. She made me feel powerful in a way Elise never did. But even as we moved forward, there were moments when I couldn't stop thinking about what I had left behind. Elise's gentle ways, her quiet strength, how she used to make me feel grounded when everything around me was spinning out of control. I loved Amara. I do. But I knew I'd never get that peace back. I never told Amara this, though. Not in the way I should have. I never told her how much it hurt to turn my back on Elise. I never told her how often I thought about the woman I used to love, the one who still believed in me even when I couldn't believe in myself. The decision to marry Amara wasn't something I came to lightly. It wasn't just a choice between her and Elise. It was a choice between who I was and who I wanted to be. And in the end, I chose the fire. I chose to burn. Maybe that makes me weak. Maybe it makes me a villain. But at that moment, it felt like the only choice I could make. Now I'm sitting here, thinking about all that was lost, all that I gave up in order to live this life with Amara. It was the life I chose, and it's the life I now have to live with. We're getting married soon, and I can't help but wonder if Elise would have ever forgiven me, if she ever thought about the man I could have been for her, the one she loved so completely. Or maybe I'll never know. But I do know this. I never meant to betray her. I just couldn't decide. I didn't lie to either of them. I just couldn't figure out how to be the man they needed me to be. And in the end, I'm left with the consequences of my own indecision. And now, as Amara and I prepare for the next chapter, I realize that the truth is more complicated than I could ever admit. I didn't pick Amara because I loved her more than Elise. I picked Amara because, with her, I could be everything I needed to be. But there will always be a piece of me that wonders, if I had been brave enough to choose Elise, would I have been happy then? Would I have been enough? I don't know. I guess I'll never know.